This is a further explanation of the modern ninjutsu concept. Um, Included in this are two links. One goes to a PDF. Well, both of them go to PDFs on Scribd. One of them is a guerrilla warfare camp that my dojo hosted some years ago. The other one is an espionage camp that my school hosted some years ago. Now, these camps were done for two reasons. One, because the information I'm teaching is accurate and viable. Uh, Two, because it was kind of an adventure camp thing. It was going out and wargaming, and it wasn't necessarily being actual training for a mission or to go out and be a spy or a guerrilla or anything like that. But it gave the people who participated into this an inside look. This included some people in the security field, some people who dealt with counterterrorism, uh, soldiers, stuff like that. So they had a basic idea of how these guerrilla camps were run, and help them do their jobs in Iraq and Afghanistan. Uh, PMCs doing similar things. I even had some militia guys show up, and I just had some average Joes who just thought it would be cool and adventurous and fun. So we did them. Basically, I'm going to explain it to you as this: a in my case, in my system, the modern evolution of ninjutsu has gone into the concept of creating what would be considered proxy warfare. Training guerrilla units to go out and conduct paramilitary operations in urban, or not urban, but in enemy terrain. Um, the concept, or the original concept, yeah, even taught within the feudal era, would be for a shinobi Namano to go out to basically use set up their own little bandit clan, or however you want to think of it, and to train the bandits to operate as a proxy military force. This be an example of what might be considered state sponsored terrorism or state sponsored guerrilla activity. A good example of this would be the U.S. training the Afghanis to repel the Soviets during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Uh, by a similar note, it would also be a good example of the Japanese during World War II training guerrillas and inspiring dissension and causing inspiring and training militant extremists to become guerrillas to resist the Chinese military forces and the Allied troops during World War II. The same concept was adapted by the U.S. And the Britons during World War II as well, training and equipping French resistance. So both these handbooks basically categorize two different situations. One is the idea of the guerrilla soldier, there, and the other is that of the espionage agent. In both cases, it kind of works out because if you give a person the training of a guerrilla soldier, the basic combat training to go out and to fight as a soldier, but you give them the ability to apply espionage tactics, then you give them a little bit something to work with. Now, I'm going to examine both of these and put links up on here shortly. Okay, I gave a little hint as to what this pertained to in a little introduction for this video. When I am talking about Boryaku no Ku-Waza, what I'm referring to is the void technique of military strategy or combat strategy. This generally refers to basic maneuver warfare in which the five elements play a role. The water element represents a flanking type of action. The wind element is a fighting retreat. It's baiting your enemy to attack and then luring them into a trap. Um, the earth element is a defensive element in which you either use a defensive terrain feature or the like develop a defensive perimeter, if you were, and then when the enemy attacks, you let them penetrate your defenses. And once they've made it through the defenses, something like a minefield or booby traps or something of that nature, you charge forward and push them back into that defensive perimeter. Barbed wire, concertina wire, same effect. Um, then you have the fire strategy, which is pretty much an attacking strategy, but it also deals with surrounding an enemy and attacking from different, using small teams to attack from different places. If you would imagine that your enemy is camped and there's this circle, now of course you can pretty much figure out, up being north, down being south, uh, right being east, left being west, that your enemy is encamped in this circle. And so you would attack them from the north, and then while they go to defend the northern perimeter, you suddenly attack them from the west. When I divert troops to protect the western perimeter, you remove, pull your guys back from the north. Then you attack from the south, and then you attack from the north again, and then you attack from the east, and then you attack from the west. Each time when one unit pulls a raid attacks, they pull away. Um, Now, the void element is when you pretty much dismiss your army and say, fight by your own accord, however you desire. Some people, based on their personality types, will choose, digging in and setting up a defensive perimeter, building fortifications. Other people prefer hit and run type of attacks, harassing fire, assaults, that direct flanking activity. The idea also of the void strategy is in training others to fight. Some of these people will go out, they'll fight on their own, they'll attract followers, and they'll train these followers to go out and attack. Some of these people, and another further explanation of this principle would be sending in your espionage agent, your ninja agent, if you were, to train a small guerrilla force or a proxy force. Um, these guerrilla soldiers would be trained in very few things. They would have very few skills. Camouflage, disguise, some basic field intelligence, maybe some leadership principles. They would be given basic arms, very small arms, and once they've gone through, a 3 to 5 day training course, this would be an intensive training course, but it would be a 3 to 5 day intensive training course. Once they go through and they learn these basic skills, then they would use actual combat to test them. Once these people have performed, 5 or 6, 10, 15, whatever that the instructing agent feels is necessary for them to have the experience to be able to apply these principles and to prove that they can apply these principles in combat, under stress, and in a real life situation. These people would be dismissed and sent out to train other cells, other guerrilla cells or whatever. Now, the same strategy, bear in mind, is used by many countries that are in support of terrorism, uh, as a way of creating terrorists in other countries, as a way to harass and attack, things of that nature. So this is where the intelligence community allows other people to do the fighting for them. Um, During World War II, the commandos and espionage agents trained in Nakano were notoriously famous for this. In fact, many of the guerrillas that they trained are still active today. Some of the Muslim terrorist cells and some of the Muslim guerrillas in Southeast Asia, in the Philippines, for example, got their training from Nakano. Um, Same with several of the guerrillas in southern China were trained because of these Nakano agents using these guerrillas to attack the Chinese government and allied forces in the region. The problem that occurred with the Japanese is that, and bear in mind, we made the same mistake in Afghanistan following the Soviet invasion. The Japanese were notorious for sending these guerrilla units, these proxy forces, out as cannon fodder. and using them to find out the strength of the Chinese and the American forces they were attacking. And what ended up happening was a lot of these guerrillas, which were responsible for the intelligence and other activities for the Japanese government, eventually turned on the Japanese and ended up ambushing Japanese soldiers, and what was considered a a mission, a standard combat mission or a standard supply mission or whatever, uh, turned into ambushes and attacks, which helped drive and weaken the Japanese influence in China. Uh, Now, in the case of Afghanistan, we had a potential with the Majindi to, um, once we chased the Soviets out, to help better the country, to help establish a better government, a better military presence from the Afghan people themselves in the country, as we were at the time seen as heroes and such. If you look at movies back during the 80s from the Cold War era, Rambo 3 be one example of this. Uh, we were very popular about the idea of helping the Afghanis and helping them fight the Soviets and everything. The problem was we used them basically as cannon fodder. When we stopped helping them, we didn't help them rebuild their infrastructure, education, anything else. And it's what allowed groups like the Taliban to move in and to essentially um, basically take that combat training they got from us and turn it into creating their own kind of almost feudal empire in attempts to overthrow the lawful Afghani government. So this method of strategy has its drawbacks, uh, but generally speaking, most of these guerrilla soldiers are trained in basic camouflage, maybe a little bit of disguise, basic field intelligence, marksmanship, and that's pretty much it. They can shoot a gun. They know a few basic tactics, and that's it. A few people might be trained in leadership to go out and to lead these units, but generally speaking, the agent or the operating agent, the shinobi, if it were in the modern context, um, would not reveal everything he knows. He would not give away all of his training to these people. He would give them a very half-assed version of it. Same with maybe some basic karate techniques for hand-to-hand combat, or some basic combatives techniques, maybe one or two, probably one form to teach these martial arts techniques, usually something related to the five element kata, or something approaching similar principles. In China, before the five element kata of Chinese alchemy had its influence, the military strategy was again five elements, but they were depicted by the spear, the bow, the sword, the chariot, and then there was that last one, which was pretty much the whole. Wasn't really depicted as so much as a military strategy as something done by spies. And in the espionage world, these guerrillas, these proxy forces, would be referred to essentially as disposable agents or disposable spies. Um, I'm going to post the links up here for the basic guerrilla warfare course we did and the basic strategies behind it, just to give you a basic idea. Included in the PDF for this little camp was a rundown comparing the actual training of professional soldiers in comparison to these guerrilla soldiers, which really didn't have a whole lot of training in comparison. Uh, Now, on top of that, the idea of the guerrilla sniper isn't so much someone who is even comparable to a professional sniper in the military. Probably about the equivalent of a designated marksman. Usually, these would be people who came from a rural background, had experience with hunting, was good at shooting, which is why they were, given the position of being a sniper. But even then, the general purpose of the sniper wasn't so much the long-range marksmanship. Long-range marksmanship is an advantage when you're talking about small teams, but the primary goal of the sniper was scouting, penetrating enemy terrain, getting a layout for the area, making maps, gauging enemy strength, things of that nature. Uh, Now, the important element to this would be that the operating agent, the ninja agent, would be in the area training people first to establish an intelligence network using espionage tactics. From this intelligence network, they would recruit people to develop into proxy forces or guerrilla forces. And even though I'm not going into the espionage aspect of it first, I'm going into the guerrilla aspect of it, because these espionage agents, especially those responsible for recruiting and training the proxy forces, would first have to go through the basic espionage training, and then they would also have to develop into having that same combat training, that same guerrilla training, as well as leadership training to be able to form into these units. To send 5 or 10 guys into an area to do this, to establish, this type of network and these types of cells would not be something done within weeks or months. It would actually be a situation created within the course of years. A 3 to 5 year, maybe even a 10-year plan. It would take over a decade to develop a reasonable force to be considered of any worth in that regard. Once this is done, you have cases of guerrilla cells, guerrilla armies from all over the world, especially in South America, the Middle East, Cuba, as example. All of this would have an effect on more than one element. This section deals with the espionage aspect, and I'm going to put this in modern terms uh, because the basic principles used in the modern world of espionage apply to ninjutsu. Since we live in the 21st century, it's a lot easier to understand this. First of all, a lot of hand gestures can be used as uh, it can be used for silent communication. This is common in the military. Currently, right now, in the modern army, uh, and more so, it was this way in the older military. Not sure how far back this goes, but the gesture of doing this means to stop, to freeze. This means to lay down. This means rally. Uh, you know, that is security or observation. If you do this and point at somebody and then you point them in a direction, it's a silent communication to go and see what's ahead or go scout ahead, to go take point, whatever. Um, the fact that hand gestures, for example, the Kujikari symbols can be used. A person disguised as a Buddhist or a Shinto monk using these hand gestures can be sitting there doing their, prayers, their meditation, and while they're doing their little thing, going through the little hand symbols, this particular symbol, when seen, means for the other people around them to attack, and therefore the monk who is in the middle of town, who is in observance of everything, who is listening to when things are planned and having soldiers come to him or samurai come to him wanting some sort of divine blessing or divine guidance or something of that nature, uh, when he realizes the opportune time to attack is, he, makes this gesture, and it's a symbol for others around him to attack. The idea of gathering intelligence is knowing the enemy's plans, and there's different types of intelligence. There's human intelligence, information you get from other people. There is direct intelligence, intelligence that the agent sees himself. Um, there is enemy intelligence, which is enemy's plans that you steal. There is technological or mechanical intelligence, which is intelligence gathered through machinery, satellite imagery, for example, or spy planes, or things of that nature, which didn't exist back then. Um, so all this is there. You also have to realize that in passing along this information, some of this information will be passed along as something as simple as two guys meeting for coffee and referring to certain things. Something as simple as, "Did you read your horoscope today?" The term horoscope can be referenced to the word report. This was a common code word used by the British during World War II in a lot of documentaries I heard on espionage and stuff like that when I was comparing the modern practice of espionage to the ninjutsu practice when I was expanding my system and modernizing it. So I use the term horoscope a lot because it's such a common phrase in the espionage world referring to a report, and the other guy would be like, "Oh no, I didn't read my horoscope today," which means I didn't read today's reports. Um, and this same person can be like, "Oh well, here I have a Christmas card for your wife, or a birthday card for your wife," and it can, the term wife, daughter, mother, any of that, your brother, whatever, for that card can also symbolize another meaning in passing along that information. So it's not all cloak and dagger, sneaking around, picking things up, pulling out secret passageways, and having, these big, obvious James Bond, Hollywood type of situations. If done properly, this information will be passed along between two couriers who've never met each other before in their lives, and they will recognize each other by a certain type of tie shirt combination, a certain type of tie shirt gesture combination, a code phrase like you know well, the weather is nice today. Oh yes, I really enjoy the sunlight. Not very many people say, "Oh yes, I really enjoy the sunlight," and even if it's a cloudy day, a rainy day, whatever, somebody could be like, come and say, "I really enjoy the weather today," and the response to, "You need to break contact and leave, we're being observed, or something's wrong," can be as simple as, "No, I prefer the rain," or "I prefer the snow," or something of that nature. So these things that seem common and out of place, meaningless small talk, can carry a double meaning in the espionage world. On top of that, things like cryptography, writing out encryption codes and stuff like that, they don't serve to prevent someone from getting the information. They don't act to delay them from getting the information so that operations can take place when they need to be done. So I'm included the little PDF in this for the espionage camp that I had done, and this will cover a lot of the material and stuff of that nature that will give somebody a look into how this is done. Now, not all this is ninjutsu. Some of this comes from other sources of espionage work that translate better from the principles of ninjutsu. But already, discussed is that element of the void element or the wood element of strategy in Chinese alchemy, Shintoism, and even its influence on ninjutsu, in that you basically plant a seed and allow that seed to grow into something completely different. And sometimes that tends to backfire on you, but that tends to relate more to that covert ops type of mentality. So, what I'm talking about here isn't so much a specific type of training or a specific set of skills, but a collection of skills and using common skills for other means. For example, the whole concept of marksmanship or hand-to-hand combat. That element exists because you know, for a guerrilla soldier trained in hand-to-hand combat, it might not be as important as a professional soldier. Actually, it's less important for a professional soldier because battle drills and hand-to-hand combat are going to serve as a basis for developing individual discipline and control and things of that nature. Whereas it's going to apply differently to other things for a guerrilla soldier or for an espionage agent, because they're not going to have all that. They might not have all that technology to rely on if captured. At the same time, it's still not the hand-to-hand combat, the martial arts aspect isn't something that is specific to espionage practice. It's something that is learned in addition to it. Uh, it's a skill used, or it's a required skill to have, but it's a skill that's not part of the practice of espionage or the practice of ninjutsu. So this is part of helping to explain why there's a difference between uh, martial arts that a person would study and then the ninjutsu element, which would be completely different as it relates more to espionage and intelligence gathering and things of that nature.